Welcome to the France 24 newsroom. We're going to go straight to the Élysée Palace, where President Emmanuel Macron is speaking amid the first cabinet meeting since Thursday's reshuffle. Let's take a listen.
Commitment with special meaning for our nation. And under the authority of the Prime Minister, several governments have advanced by implementing the program that the French people elected me to accomplish. You have gone through budget exercises, the reform of the pension plans, significant laws on energy and the economy, and I will come back to the roadmap for the 100 days that we engaged upon together. And this is why I have chosen continuity and efficiency for the coming period, by confirming and reaffirming quite clearly my confidence in the Prime Minister. She has chosen 8 new ministers to join the cabinet, and I would like to thank them for their commitment and for being here today. I would also like to express my warmest thanks to the 8 ministers who are leaving us and who have worked since the spring of 2022 and since May of 2017 for others. I'd like to thank them for all their hard work. I'd like to express my gratitude to all of those who are making a commitment today, and I measure just how many sacrifices this requires. But our country is well worth it. The collective commitment that we are now engaged in is the commitment I made to the French people a bit more than a year ago, and which is the continuity of what we have been taking on for more than 6 years now, with a clear course of works that we have set out to accomplish. This course is very clear: the independence of the country in order to consolidate a more just model. The independence of France is industrial, military, energy, and geopolitical independence. No policies are worth anything if we are not independent. And of course, this also involves financial independence. And it is only by producing more, by building more, and by consolidating this independence that we will be able to continue to have a social model which is among the most generous in the world, but by making it more fair, by correcting some inequities, by correcting them now, and also through efforts in the fields of health and education. This course of action continues and intensifies the course of action that we began 6 years ago. First of all, industrialization and more employment. We have seen results. Reforms have been undertaken over the past 6 years. Unemployment is continuing to fall off despite the difficulties. We have created 1,700,000 employments, many of them in the industrial sector, and we have continued to open factories in places where many have closed. We've seen in Dunkirk more than 3,000 jobs created in an electric battery plant, and in Ardèche there will be a new medical production laboratory opening. We have voted on laws, including a law on a green industry, which is the translation of the Europeans' green industrial policy, going even farther than the Americans in this regard. And then we have built a policy for full employment with the significant reforms that are continuing with France Travail program, and then the reform of unemployment benefits. The convictions and the principles that guide us are that we believe in work and we believe in merit-based organizations. And over the past weeks and months, we have continued to make decisions, to draft laws, and to see results. The second main course that we are following has to do with progress. Progress comes through a more efficient public service. sector, enabling our citizens to have more autonomy and to correct certain inequities. And I think that through training, education, and health, we can, in particular, adjust these inequalities. Significant reforms have been announced with regard to education, from the pact with teachers, the reform of professional schools, reforms concerning school trajectories for all of our students. This is a deep reform of our school system, welcoming children earlier in kindergarten, continuing the efforts for children who are in the most disadvantaged neighborhoods, and beginning in kindergarten, improving assessments, aiding school leavers or potential school leavers, increasing efforts for young teenagers, and those who are entering secondary school, and then including sports activities in school. The reform of professional schooling, where we have a third of our students and many of our school leavers has been breaking all records despite the best efforts of teachers and their parents and the parents of the students. So this is a big area of work that is awaiting us. And I have also asked for some improvements in the organization of the baccalaureate exam and improvements in access to education at the university level. In the health field as well, many things have been done. We have access to a service of access to health, which will be implemented during this year. More than 600,000 older or chronically ill French people will be able to have access to a general practitioner, and we are also working on a plan to improve access to emergency services. This has required a lot of work, and there's still a lot of work ahead of us. And still on the subject of progress, over the past weeks, the Prime Minister and her cabinet have been working on overseas territories and also on our locally our local neighborhoods where there are a lot of disadvantaged people living. And then we have the question of the environment. Our country, like all major nations, is facing the need for a transition because the consequences of the model of production around the world has created an environmental problem. So there's an urgent problem, but there's also long-term solutions that must be found. Over the past months and years, we've looked at energy savings. This has led to a great mobilization of our citizens, quite remarkable, in fact. Everything that citizens have done. We have announced over the past 100 years, we have launched a new water plan, which will enable us to prepare for the dry spell this summer. With regard to the transition of our economic model, we have also passed significant laws, 3. One for renewable energies, deploying them faster, one for nuclear energy, deploying that more quickly. 2 reactors in Bugey will go into operation, including 6 new ones. And thirdly, a faster greening of our industrial sector. So we are moving forward on the path to progress. And with the Prime Minister, we will be soon presenting the environmental plan that will affect all sectors and that will give greater transparency to our program in this regard. And a lot of work has been carried out over the past few months, and this is part of the European action for reducing emissions by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2050. And just a few weeks ago, we held a summit for green financing here in Paris, fighting against poverty and against the consequences of global warming. And then the fourth course that we have set has to do with Republican law and order. And we are continuing to advance on this path as well. These past weeks, we have been able to fill out our mechanisms. We have a law for the Ministry of the Interior, which will enable us to create new positions with budgetary measures, including for the fire department. And in recent weeks, we have voted on a law for the Army, a budget program for the upcoming period. And through these two laws, we will have doubled the budget for the Ministry of the Army. We didn't wait for the war, but the French nation needs to be able to protect itself against these new threats. We also have a law on justice, and this has led to an unprecedented investment by the government, more magistrates, more people working as clerks and in the administration, investment in the penitentiary system, but also deep reforms to serve a better, more effective justice, closer to the people and fairer. With regard to this Republican order, I think we all know today that we are based on solid actions, and we have worked hard and gone fast. All the while, people were saying, oh, this government will never be able to get their laws through. And yet, in this past year, we have passed more laws than we did in the 6 previous years. We've reached agreements. And we did use the Constitution to pass the pension reform law, because we can use the Constitution and we use it with respect, but determination as well. And so, yes, the country is moving forward with, of course, independence, justice, with these 4 main pillars, these 4 courses that I have described that we have been building resolutely, and we will continue to act. This summer means that we have to address in particular a follow-up to the uprisings of the month of July. We need to help mayors. We did vote on a law for emergency assistance, which will enable people to go more quickly with regard to handling questions of justice and also reconstruction of some infrastructures that were burned or damaged, and so that they can go back into operation as quickly as possible. We must continue to support our forces of law and order so that they can continue working, and I want to congratulate them for their efforts on the 13th and 14th of July, but they must be very rigorous and they have been very rigorous in the days and weeks that followed these uprisings. We also have to work with families that are living in precarity and poverty. We need to provide the necessary support structures to help them to have access to culture, sport, and education as we prepare for a new school year. Children and teenagers must be prepared for this school year, and of course, we have to prepare for the school year in the best conditions possible. Then there's the question of drought. Many of the areas of France have already set up a plan for lack of water resources this summer. We need to work with farmers who have had a lot of difficulties in different sectors. Some suffering from attacks of mildew disease and other problems facing both breeders and growers. So we need to focus on the future of these agricultural sectors. And then, of course, there's purchasing power, which is a significant issue with the increase in energy prices this summer, even if they are going up less steeply here than in neighboring countries. And then, of course, there's access to health care, which is also an urgent problem. It will take several years for structural reforms to be fully deployed, but we need to be especially vigilant with regard to emergency services. We made some decisions last year, and I think we will need to keep monitoring this situation very closely. So these are the 4 urgent subjects for the summer. And then we have the month of September, when we have the return to school and return to work after the holidays. The French nation, a sporting nation, will be entering into a period when we have to really project our image of joy, pride, and collective organization, because we will be welcoming the Olympic Games, and we want these games to be held in full security. First of all, we will be having the World Rugby Cup. And then we will enter into the final phases of preparation for the 2024 Olympic and Paralympic Games. We're just about a year away from those games. So these 2 events, the Rugby Cup and the Olympic Games, will really be an image of our nation and the pride that we have in our nation, from school to culture to the life in our regions, also talking about the tourism, fine French cuisine, and safety as well. All of the ministries will be mobilized for these efforts, but we must be exemplary, and we must be proud and give hope to our nation. And then as of September, we will also be preparing the country for a very demanding exercise regarding public finances. With the ministers in charge of budget and finance, public accounts, we'll be looking at environment, school, health, and we will be defining a public financing strategy that will enable us to be credible and strong, to follow the course for reimbursing the debt, continuing to lower taxes, and reasonably managing our deficit, because this is what gives France credibility within Europe and enables us to pursue our strategy that has been ours for the past 6 months. Strong France within Europe, and a Europe more sovereign and more independent and more fair. France can lead these reforms within Europe if we are credible in our own country. We will bring all of the political forces around the table to share our constraints, because these are the constraints that we have to face up to. We will have the environmental planning that will, of course, be very important as of September when we come back to work. There's the question of immigration, which is also on the table. And we will be working with constructive and Republican opposition members. There will be a significant reform to be carried out with a robust text that has pragmatic answers to many questions, but I will certainly come back to this later. I think we need to advance methodically on this subject. And we will have to be responding to the unrest that the country experienced in the month of July. There's a risk of a deep fragmentation of our nation and divisions within our people. So we need both authority and respect and legitimate hope. We need to provide a deep, complete answer to this unrest. The Prime Minister and myself have asked several of you to work on what lessons we might draw from this period of unrest, and this is something that we will also be working on closely as of September. And once again, I talked about justice earlier, and we must develop our collective capacity to respond to the challenges of the moment. And it should be a humanist response, including authority, including a demanding nature. We need to be able to build and forge the citizens of tomorrow using culture, education. We have to work with families that we can support, so that education can be carried out in families as well, because it's not up to only the school system to educate young people. And finally, a word on method before I give the floor to the Prime Minister. This course that I have outlined, this is something that we will be following along together in an exemplary manner. And I say this because this is what the people is expecting from the members of our government, to serve a collective project, to serve the population of France. People are watching you and all the details of your action, your work. And what we owe the country is to act, to explain, to respond, and to do so with dignity and the respect that we owe our compatriots. And sometimes violent language and inappropriate behavior takes up too much space in public life. And we're expecting the French government to be exemplary and to make French people proud. So let's do that. And then we're also expected to work together. There is no individual success if there is a collective failure. So this is a coherent project that you must serve together, a course that we will follow in a united manner. You need to be effective. A lot of the crisis of democracy that we're experiencing today is linked to the fact that decisions don't come quickly enough. A problem comes, and by the time an announcement is made, months or years may pass before any real changes are felt amongst the people. So we have to double our efforts to be more efficient so that real life changes, so that the decisions that you make and the authority that you show actually implements decisions that will change the everyday life of our fellow citizens. Ministers have to manage their ministries. Being a minister doesn't just mean talking on television. It means implementing measures that correspond to a defined strategy, to the policies defined by the Prime Minister. And through the decisions that you take, you implement these policies and you must direct your ministries. This is indispensable. You have to work as close to the population as possible, and the more your decisions serve the people, the more your results will be effective and will be effectively felt. We also have to take account of the members of parliament, both the majority and the opposition. And we have to work with local elected authorities as well. Mayors are indispensable to our policy in order to make it more efficient, effective, and understood. And this is why in the coming months, I will work on this new method that we have called the National Council for Refoundation. And beginning September, I will continue to focus on changing these methods, in particular with regard to health and education, so that decisions can be made on a local level with stakeholders on the ground. So it's not just people receiving instructions. We have to give people a clear direction and then let people who are working in the field do their job intelligently and with a certain degree of flexibility. And this is the method that I would expect you to apply. Madam Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen ministers, this is what I wanted to say to this Council of Ministers to defend the coherence of the actions that have been carried out under the authority of the Prime Minister, and to encourage you all to follow through on this course and to take account of the current emergency situations. Thank you, Mr. President.